I didn't know that when I was praying, I was protesting.
You know, I don't think even if I dropped acid, that would make sense.
Faith, firearms, and freedom. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 320. Thank you all so very much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week this week. For those of you returning, welcome back. Thank you for your continued support, and hope you will enjoy today's show. Hope you will come back for more. And our new listeners who join us every week. I am we add new listeners all the time. And if you've just stumbled across the show, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you enjoy what you hear and that you will check out our previous episodes and you'll come back for more next week as well. The plans for this week kind of went off the rails. If you've listened the last couple of weeks, I've been in the middle of a huge project at work, which has finally come to its culmination after 2 years. This week, fortunately, did not have to roll everything back and start over from scratch. So our client did move forward, and all of my hard work for the last 18 months is finally paying off. But what it means is that I worked another 60-hour week for almost the third straight week. I worked through the 4th of July weekend and the weekend previous, and it looks like I may be facing another close to 60-hour week this week as their second full week, the client's second full week live with their new software. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, what happened this week, the plan was originally that we were going to do a Clinging to God and Guns show with Pastor Bennett. We were going to get together on Thursday and record. Unfortunately, most days this week I was working till late into the evening and was not able to record on Thursday night. Pastor Bennett had Friday night plans with his church youth group. And so everything sort of fell through because of my job, and I apologize for that. Was really looking forward to hanging out with Pastor Bennett again this week and talking about various and sundry issues. I think we were going to talk about the big news that happened over 4th of July weekend. We'll get into that in a moment. We'll discuss it. But first, I do want to thank all the people who make this show possible. Folks, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. And that means we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. You will not hear an advertisement on this program because we just don't have them. We have people, we rely on the people who support us through their own personal donations, their own contributions. And we are forever grateful to all of those who have supported the show over the years. And these are people we call the Reformation Gun Club. Today, I want to give a special shout out to these members: Morris from Dallas, Texas, Stephen B., Melvin from Holt, Missouri, Richard from Pagosa Springs, Colorado, Dan from Livonia, Michigan, Jackie from Federal Way, Washington, Edwin from Round Lake Beach, Illinois, who is a regular lurker on our monthly online hangouts, Richard from Wichita, Kansas, Robert from DeKalb, Illinois, and Paul from McKinney, Texas, right down the road from me. Thank you all so much for your support for the show. As I said, we're listener funded. We rely on our members and their contributions to make everything happen, and I really do, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate, especially during these trying Biden economic times, the support that the Reformation Gun Club members continue to give us. If you would like to find out more about how you can support the show and what the benefits are of becoming a member, members get early access to the show every week. They get invitations to our online Hangouts, which we try to do every month. and lots of cool swag, access through our website to hundreds of hours of exclusive content that we release only to members. And so check it out, armedlutheran.us/gun club. Look at all the benefits and the tiers and all the pricing and all that good stuff. For as little as about $1.26 a month, you can become a member and help support the show. Speaking of which, I did mention the online Hangouts. July and December we do, or at least we started this last year, and it was so much fun. We've decided we're going to continue this. We're going to try to make this sort of an annual thing. July is for the online Hangout last year, what we did, I don't know where it is. I don't know why I'm looking for it, because it's not like I can show it to you. But I have an ammo can filled with 22 TCM brass that each piece is individually numbered. And I had my daughter come in, and she shook up the ammo can box, and we drew numbers. And members of the Reformation Gun Club in July and December get prizes. Everybody who well, we didn't do everybody. Let's see. So here's how it worked. Based on your membership level, you get a certain number of entries. And if you're subscribed, if you're on the Facebook group, you get an extra entry. If you're on the MeWe group, you get an extra entry. If you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you get an extra entry. And then what we do is we give away some prizes. Last year, I know at Christmas we gave away a bunch of tumblers and a bunch of one-of-a-kind Armed Lutheran beer steins and coffee mugs. And we gave away some T-shirts and a bunch of books. And so we'll do the same thing for the July online Hangout, which is going to be, let me pull up my calendar. I just scheduled it. It will be 8:30 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, July 23rd. That is in 2 weeks. So make your plans now to attend. You'll be able to join us on Zoom if you are a member, and if you are not, you'll be able to watch or listen to the results. That will be in episode 322, I think, if my math is correct. So for those of you members who always look forward to our online Hangouts, we'll be doing the next one on July 23rd in 2 weeks. And for those of you who are not members yet, we encourage you to join us, because it's a lot of fun hanging out with the members once a month, shooting the breeze, talking about life and about current events and favorite adult beverages and things of this nature. And this time, we're going to be giving away a bunch of prizes as well, so I hope you'll come join us. Okay, so now we are well past the 72-hour mark for commenting on the events of July 4th in Highland Park, Illinois. Here is what we know as of this moment. The shooter, who will remain nameless, we do not mention the names of mass shooters on the show. The shooter opened fire on the July 4th parade in Highland Park, Illinois, from the top of a building. As of this recording, there are 7 dead. I think there's more than 36 wounded. The shooter successfully fled the scene, interestingly enough, dressed as a woman, kind of blended in with the crowd and escaped. Left behind a rifle, which was reportedly a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, despite all of the news reports from the very first day or two reporting that the weapon was an automatic weapon. It was not. Because he bought the gun legally and didn't alter the weapon's serial number, which is, so he didn't turn it into a ghost gun. The recovery of that weapon was key to identifying the shooter and capturing him, because he left the gun behind and then fled the scene in his Honda Fit. He drove to Wisconsin, where he stopped and actually contemplated another mass shooting there. But as I recall from the last thing I read, he decided against it because he had not had time to plan it in the same way that he did the one in Highland Park. He was arrested, found in possession of a Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which again was reported to be a rifle, which is not a rifle for those of you who are new to guns or don't recognize that particular make and model. The Kel-Tec Sub 2000 is a foldable 9mm carbine, which basically means it shoots pistol ammunition. And he had maybe 50 or 60 rounds of ammo. So a box of ammunition is all he had left. And the guy was a walking red flag. He had tattoos all over his face. He's scrawny and colorless. Apparently, friends considered him to be a loner and kind of strange and aloof. He dropped out of high school. He's posted pictures of himself in various costumes, some of them in drag. He dressed up as Waldo and went to a local Trump rally couple of years ago, which prompted the media to suggest that he's some kind of a Trump supporter. He also is considered himself a rapper and posted some very disturbing music videos, if you want to call them that, where the subject matter was essentially school shootings, where he was the shooter, dropping, dressed in tactical gear and dropping 9mm shells all over the floor and all kinds of things. So there were red flags galore on this guy. He was basically a depressed loner who was craving attention. His home life was a wreck. Parents were separated or divorced or going through a divorce. Family apparently was in a bad state financially. I think the probably all the lockdowns and shutdowns in Illinois killed his dad's business and basically threw him into foreclosure. Last story I read suggested that his family was on food stamps as a result because they had basically been their entire life savings wiped out by, the failure of the family business. But we got, as you recall, and we've discussed this on the show, in the aftermath of the Uvalde shooting here in Texas, we got gun control, as I suspected we would. But what we got was very different than what President Biden and most Democrats really want, which is gun bans. What we got was enhanced background checks for minors and funding for states to develop mental health programs, which I think is a good thing, and red flag laws, which I am not so sanguine about. In all, despite all the vitriol from the right, this was a fairly innocuous bill. And so it's always the case that the party that's not in the White House generally gains seats in the midterm elections. That happens almost every 2 years, or every 4 years, I guess. And this year it's particularly pronounced because of the dissatisfaction of the American public, even among traditional Democrat voters, with the performance of the Biden administration. So Republicans are keen to avoid anything that's going to cost them votes in November, and they basically weighed the political fallout from not doing anything or doing something. So if you don't do anything, then the media, the White House, and Democrats basically paint you as caring about guns more than kids. If you do something, and you do something innocuous, relatively innocuous like this bill, you're castigated by your own base. And that's kind of the political calculus, unfortunately, that our squishy Republican Congress critters generally play with. That's the way it is. And so they decided that rather than be made to look callous and uncaring and to make gun violence a political point for the Democrats in November, they decided to do something. And I suggested a couple of episodes back that was exactly what was going to happen, and that's exactly what did happen. So what we got red flag laws, or we did not get a federal red flag law. This is the thing. And for all the people who are losing their minds about this bill and suggesting that the Republicans who voted in favor of it are traitors, I'm not crazy about the fact that they voted for it. I'm not crazy about the bill, but consider the political situation. Take a step back for a moment, consider the political situation, and consider what this bill is before you go screeching off into the night. They did not get gun bans. They did not get a federal red flag law. They did not get universal background checks. They did not get magazine bans. What they got was funding for state mental health programs. They got funding for states to help develop red flag laws. And they got something like, they got enhanced background checks for gun buyers under 21. Essentially, something that I've said we probably needed to do. I've been saying this for years. There are states that don't include juvenile mental health and juvenile criminal records in the NICS system when people go to buy guns. Once somebody turns 18, their juvenile records in most states, their records get expunged. And so they're not considered in any kind of a calculation when it comes to whether or not you can buy a gun. So if you got a violent kid at 17, who's, like the Uvalde shooter who's, killing cats and putting their bloody bodies in bags and posting videos of it online, or who has been in juvie numerous times for the violence at school, once they turn 18, those things disappear, and they don't get considered when they go to buy a gun. They go buy an AR-15 at 18, and it's, the slate's clean. I think that's something that needed to be addressed, and I haven't gotten into the specifics of it, but if it is what it sounds like it is, I'm not opposed to this idea of enhanced background checks for those under 21. I think we need to look at somebody's juvenile record when it comes to buying guns. Now, the problem with red flag laws is, and if you have not heard us discuss it in the past, we have a full episode on red flag laws from a couple of years ago. And you can go back and listen to that, but I will kind of recap some of my thoughts on the idea. We've said many times that we oppose the idea of red flag laws in practice. I don't oppose the idea of red flag laws in principle. Let me explain what I mean by that. In principle, red flag laws are the kinds of laws that we want because they target the people who are actually a threat. They are focused on the people who are most likely to commit violence with guns, instead of like a gun ban or universal background checks or something like this, where you end up punishing gun owners at large just because of the actions of a few bad apples. The problem with red flag laws, there's a couple of problems. One is you have to be very careful about due process. So if the law is not written, it has to be written in such a way that it protects the gun owner who has been accused. Okay, because the Constitution basically guarantees your right to face your accuser, to your right to due process. You can't have somebody just assumed to be a bad person and therefore take their guns away without giving them some sort of redress, an opportunity to defend themselves in court, and to recover their property in a reasonable fashion if their property is confiscated. The other problem with red flag laws is one that Sean Sorrentino writes about over on Substack, and he used to write about at the NC Gun blog. I'm not sure whether Sean still blogs there or not. He was the host and creator of the Gun blog Variety Cast, and he's been makes a very good point about this issue. The idea that someone can tell the court that you are a danger to yourself or others, and therefore you must have your guns removed from your property, then have law enforcement come to your house and confiscate your guns, but leave you, the crazy person, alone at home, now even more angry and agitated because you've had your property confiscated. If a person is too dangerous to possess firearms, they probably should be locked up. So what red flag laws unfortunately do, and this is true with any kind of a violence protection order or any kind of a restraining orders, it's just a piece of paper. If that person is truly dangerous, they should probably be locked up and evaluated. If you're really concerned that that person is a danger to himself or others, then they should probably be taken in and evaluated before you, instead of just taking their guns away from them and leaving them out in the public to harm other people. The third problem is the problem of who can take out a red flag violence protection order. Who can execute one of these restraining orders? It has to be limited to the people who are closest to the person in question. It can't just be anybody and everybody. You have to have very specific rules about who can and who can't take out one of these orders. If they're too broad, then it's wide open for abuse. You also have to have some sort of a standard for executing those orders as well. You can't just be he's a Trump voter, or he protests in front of abortion clinics, or he's some kind of conservative, crazy Christian person. You can't just there has to be a specific criteria for executing these laws. Now, fortunately, the federal government isn't going to be doing this. They're funding states, providing funding for states to create these red flag laws. This is the way it ought to be if you're going to have this kind of thing happen, is the states, as we, under a federalist system, the states are basically the experiments, the labs that conduct all these experiments to figure out the best way to address these issues, sort of like we've talked about with the Roe versus Wade thing, where every state will come up with a system that works best for them. If you're going to get red flag laws, and I suspected that we were going to, and many states already have them, at least we didn't get a federal red flag law. Now, here's the big problem, and the biggest reason that I'm not a fan of red flag laws. They generally don't work because you have to actually execute them for them to do any good. Even if you have the perfect red flag law, right? You have all of the protections for due process. You have all of the very specific reasons why someone could execute an order. You have everything very tight and very well crafted and well written. Even if you have the perfect red flag law, it doesn't do any good if people don't execute one. And this shooting in Highland Park is another example of that. And we've seen this with previous mass shootings where there are multiple red flags, where the individual was known to police, maybe even to federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI, and nothing was done. In the case of the Highland Park shooter, here's a kid who was posting videos online, violent videos online, and who was talking and writing about school shootings. Here's a kid who was threatening violence against his family and other people, had police come to his house at least twice. Once they confiscated all the knives in his house because he had threatened to kill his family or to cut his family up or something like this. And the police showed up and they took away his knives. We went from threatened knife violence to killing 7 people at a July 4th parade. So red flag laws are worthless if they're not executed. When we've seen repeatedly in the past these mass shooters who were known to law enforcement to be dangerous, to have incidents. I read I think it was at CNN, but the CNN report, which was basically talking about the family life of the shooter, was talking about how over a 6-year period there were 12 domestic incidents where police responded to their home. That doesn't count the 2 where they came out specifically for the shooter, for the eventual shooter. One of those 2 times taking away the kids, all the knives and swords and things that the guy had. So despite all of these interventions by law enforcement, they claim that they didn't have any reason to take him into custody. And that makes no sense to me, because here we had a clear indication that this kid was dangerous enough for them to take the knives out of his home, but not dangerous enough for them to actually lock him up and evaluate him. So how good are red flag laws? They're not. They're worthless. Unless you're going to take people into custody and you're going to evaluate them. And the problem with that idea, and maybe the reason that they don't do it, is because we don't have mental health resources anymore like we used to. I'm not saying that we need to go back to the old days of the cruel and awful mental institutions, but we need something. And we can't continue to do what we're doing. The other problem that we have here is that we have, and this is the problem that is not going to be easy to solve, and that is the family that's falling apart. We have a family in disarray. We have a mother and father who were constantly fighting, apparently. We have, according to the article that I read, the shooter was sort of overlooked. Sports coaches in school said he was always the last one to get picked up because it's like, well, they forgot to pick him up again. The parents were not great. I'm not saying they were abusing him. I'm suggesting that from every indication, they really weren't paying attention to him. And if you look at the things that this kid was doing, he's crying out for attention. Everything he did was to gain some sort of attention and notoriety. And this is why, as I alluded to earlier in the show, the media needs to be a little more, I know if it bleeds, it leads, and that's the biggest problem with the media, or one of the big problems with the media right now, is that they want to be the first to cover the story. That's why we do the 72-hour rule, because everything that they report in the early hours, at least the first 72 hours of one of these tragedies, is wrong, because they're rushing to get every bit of information that they can find out and be the first to do it. But in doing that and plastering this kid's face all over the newspapers, in every news website, on every news network report, they're just giving these people the attention that they so desperately crave. And it creates copycats. In the wake of the Uvalde shooting, there were numerous people who attempted violence at schools, and thank goodness were stopped by law enforcement or by armed school staff in the aftermath of Uvalde. All of those are copycats. And this kid, apparently, I don't know whether it's true. I read somewhere that he admired the Uvalde shooter. So he clearly was seeking attention, and the same kind of attention that the Uvalde shooter got, he wanted for himself. He wanted to go down in history somehow and be remembered. And the best way to do that is to get on CNN and all of the major news networks and to have your face plastered on every cable news outlet for weeks, if not months on end. What we need to be doing is and I've said this, I've talked about this in past. I did a Reformation Gun Club only show about this. The way we deal with these mass killers should be completely revamped. We need to encourage the news outlets not to publish all the personal information about this guy. We need them to avoid putting his name in the newspaper. The media should be encouraged to not give these people the same kind of, or the kind of media accolades, the attention that they're so desperately craving, because it just creates copycats. And as quickly as possible, we should dispatch these people and be done with them. I think there should be a federal law that basically says if you're a mass shooter, and clearly we can prove, and if we can prove that you did it, most of the time they're caught at the scene. The Highland Park thing is very unusual in that the shooter actually ended up in another state before he got caught. But there's no question that he did it at this point. Too many things have pieced it all together. But if you're convicted of a mass shooting, there should be one appeal, although I don't know whether that's, I don't know what the point is, because like I said, most of the time we know who these people are. They're glory-seeking people who they want to be known. They're not trying to shoot up a school or shoot up a parade or whatever. They're not trying to do these things and get away and become and remain anonymous. They want to be caught. They want to be known. They want to be seen. So we should let the American people see them be executed in short order. We should not give these people the attention they so desperately seek, and then put them behind bars for the rest of their lives for the taxpayers and the victims of their shootings to use their taxpayer money to support. We should put them in a firing squad or I'm fully in favor of the long drop. Let's bring back the gallows for mass shooters. And let's make sure that we get rid of these people and that we let other potential shooters know that they're not going to be glorified. They're going to be dispatched like dogs. We're not going to plaster their face on the news and share their weird music videos. We're going to execute them where everyone can see it. I think one of the things that we've gotten away from, and this ties into something else, and I know this is getting all kinds of off-the-wall crazy at this point. I am way out in the weeds, and I apologize, what happens when you had when all your plans for a show fell through. But I've been reading a fascinating book. I just finished a book by Joel Harrison. It's called The Faithful Executioner. And it is based on the journal of Meister Franz Schmidt, who was in the late 16th century in the Lutheran part of Germany, in the imperial city of Nuremberg. He was the official executioner for over 40 years. He kept a journal of every single person that he corporally punished. So that would be like whipping out of town with rods, or cutting off their fingers, or flogging, or putting them in the stocks, to execution. And he made a record of every person, their name and their deeds, and the method of execution for 45 years. One of the things that I came away from reading this was this idea that that punishment not only should fit the crime, and although in some cases you would sit there and read the crime and look at how horrible the execution was and think, well, that didn't make sense. In many cases it did. This was the early years of when governments were trying to really sort of codify their justice systems, kind of create systems that made sense as far as, all right, this is for this kind of crime, you get this kind of punishment. And one of the things that was key was the idea that you had to maintain to the public that the government had control of things, that the evildoer was being punished, and doing it behind closed doors and, trying them and then forgetting about them was not the best way. It's what we do now, and it doesn't seem to help. Back then, the idea was to make sure that the public understood that, one, crime was going to be punished, that the government was trying to protect them, and two, a warning to other criminals that this would be your fate if you continued in your evil ways. And we've gotten away from the idea. I mean, there's much that was done in the 17th, 16th, 17th, 15th centuries that we've gotten away from, and for good reason. But there is more that's been lost to history that I think we probably should not have gotten away from. And we talked a little about this on one of our online Hangouts a couple of months ago. The idea of shame as a form of punishment, that the shame of knowing, of having everyone in your community know that you are a criminal, is something that we've lost. What we tend to do is we try someone and then lock them up and forget about them. And the trial is generally, unless it's really salacious or sensational, it's generally not something that most people know anything about. We also, unless it's a particularly salacious case, we don't know a whole lot about the capital punishment that is carried out in this country when it is carried out. And another, I've talked about this as well. Cesare Beccaria, I believe was his name. He wrote a book in the 19th century, or maybe it was the late 17th, late 18th. Yeah, late 18th century, where he talked about, he was a criminologist, one of the early criminologists, and he talked about the idea of crime and punishment, that punishment needed to be swift, certain, and public. We've gotten away from all of that in this country. Punishment is not swift. I saw a story this past week about a guy who killed 15 people who just died in prison at the age of 80, and he killed them over 20 years ago. That's not swift punishment. Punishment also should be certain, Beccaria said. We now have a system where punishment is definitely not certain. It depends on what color your skin is, whether or not you get punished. It also depends on whether or not you're rich. If you're rich, there are ways for you to get around being punished. If you are black, there are plenty of district attorneys who believe that the idea of justice reform means that people should be given more chances, that the system is against these people, so we should not force them to pay bail, for example, which is why you see people, committing hundreds of crimes and continuing to be punished for it. Well, back in Meister Franz's day, they had the same sort of thing. I mean, people were given clemency and allowed a certain amount of do-overs, shall we say. They'd be flogged out of town and then would violate the ban and come back again. They would be thrown into the prison for stealing repeatedly, and then eventually the state would lose its patience with these people and they would be executed. Now, I'm not suggesting we should go back to that, but I am suggesting that at some point, after, 50 convictions, you probably shouldn't be let back out. We've become way too lenient in this country. And then finally, the idea of making punishment public. It used to be that the execution or the punishment of criminals was a public event. It was something that was done in the town square where everyone could see it. It was a big to-do, shall we say. Everyone came out to watch the local criminal, the local thief, or the local the local murderer be dispatched on the gallows or on the Ravenstone, or the thief placed in stocks or whatever. You had the the public spectacle of execution, which or punishment, which made the public aware that punishment was being handed out, justice was being served, and made those who might have some proclivity towards punishment or towards crime aware that this could be their fate. And they might either amend their ways or move on. And this has been a very long-winded and a very windy road to get to where I am at this moment. But it seems to me that we can't just keep passing laws or trying to ban tools that are used in crime. At some point, we've got to get back to the idea that punishment is going to be swift and certain. Now, I'm not saying that we should have kangaroo courts and that we should deny people their ability to have their day in court, to face their accuser. I'm not talking about amending or abridging the Constitution here. What I'm talking about is getting back to the core notion of what criminal justice should be, and that is to punish the evildoers and to keep them from preying on the public again in the future. And the best way to do that is to keep them either off the streets or dispatch them. And the best way to deal with people like this crazy, depressed kid who shot up the Highland Park parade, the best way to prevent future shooters who might be inspired by him is to prevent his face from being shown, prevent him from getting the attention that he deserves, that he craves, not deserves. Lord, did I say deserves? Good heavens. The attention that he thinks he deserves, and to dispatch him as quickly as possible. There's no reason that we should still have the Parkland shooter sitting in prison. There's no reason that this kid, the Buffalo shopping center or grocery store shooter, those kids, they need to be tried, executed, and done with. And you may think this doesn't sound like a Christian thing to say, to suggest that we should want these people to be executed, that we should want these people to be punished in this way. But it is an eminently Christian thing to do, to want to protect the public. The idea that we should cater to the wicked, or that we should place their rights and their desires above the protection of the general public, is not a Christian thing. The government bears the sword specifically to punish the wicked. And if they're not punishing the wicked, they are not protecting the public. And if we are going to keep them locked up and keep giving them the attention that they so desperately crave, we're only going to create more and more of these people in the future. And it is an eminently Christian thing to desire that the government would bear the sword to punish the wicked and protect the innocent. Wow, this has been a long-winded episode. All I did was jot down a few notes, and I just wanted to get these thoughts off of my chest. And I mixed a whole bunch of stuff together that I really didn't expect to throw in here. And so it's been a stream of consciousness today. And if you have any questions about this or any comments about this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do we do going forward? And I'm going to stop rambling now. Hopefully, I will be able to put things together to get either a variety show or a Clinging to God and Guns show this week. Cross my fingers, and I hope I'll be able to do that. But a reminder, July 23rd, mark your calendars, 8:30 p.m. Central. We're going to have our July online hangout with the Reformation Gun Club. If you are a member, you will be invited to attend. If you are a member, you will get an entry, at least one entry, into the drawing that we're going to be holding that night for the prizes that we're going to be giving away. And we'll have more about it in next week's show as well. So have a great week. Thank you all for listening. And till we get together again, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.